Uh, Good day, everyone. It's a good day today. Uh, Before we start, please subscribe and like and share. Um, Today we'll be talking about Britain relation with Russia. And again, before I start, please subscribe, share, and like. And let's get straight away. Today we look at how the relation between Britain and Russia has been, especially since before the First World War till today. It will mostly focus on the financial sector. It is important to know that Britain and Russia have had diplomatic relations for almost 400 years, especially when Russia was under control of the Tsars. Britain and Russia had a diplomatic relationship. But during the 1920s, before the Second World War, the things that we are witnessing today, the backlash of Russians in Britain, uh, the backlash of the investment, the businesses is not new. Because during the period of the 1920s, Britain was and Russia were engaged in economic relationship where Russians were allowed to invest and come and own property in Britain the same way they've been doing it recently. So when you look at their relationship, you realize that it's no matter how things try to look, you know, different, nothing has changed because during the 1920s, when Russians started influxing in Britain, owning properties and doing businesses, there was a big backlash from the British government, especially when the end of the 1920s came between 1927 to 1929, where the political elite, the government saw that Russians had started influencing even the political, choices and the political foundation of the British people and the British government, and they quickly, tried to limit the interaction of Russians into the British economy and the political system. And when the World War came, uh, Russia and Britain again found themselves partners. But before that, we can remember that Britain was not a friend of Russia because we remember that Hitler had a pact with uh, Joseph Stalin, that they will not attack each other. But when Hitler broke that pact and attacked Russia, immediately the British and the Russians became allies until now after the World War. And then we had these two axes of power, which are the capitalist and the communist. And also Britain was made to pick a side, and of course it shows the capitalist side. Um, when you look at this relationship, it has been never been a very solid relationship. It has always been based on mistrust, mischief, and everyone having a knife at the back of their hand, trying to see if the other one is the liar, the cheater, and vice versa. And you know, we now come to an era, especially during the Cold War, we come to an era where there are two axes of power, and the USSR, was the elite of the USSR. How we are seeing the Russians are investing in UK real estate, in UK stocks, and all these businesses they invest in. It is not new because the elite, the elitist of the USSR, the guys who control the government, they were making a lot of money, and they didn't want to keep all the money in the USSR empire in Russia, or in the Kremlin. So they were thinking of how to diversify or hide their investment, and London, Britain, especially London, you know, has always been a good, investment point for the Russian elite. And you can trace it back to the USSR empire, where when the USSR elite wanted to hide their money, they only had two options. They only had New York and London, but they were very wary of New York because because it was in American territory. But they preferred London because even though they were not good friends with the UK, their relationship was hot and cold, which they thought they could manage. So even during the Cold War, Russian elite were really investing a lot in the London financial system. And we must remember that after the World War, the most dominant financial system that came about was the American financial system, which was in New York. The only two financial systems during that time, the one in London and the one in New York, but the London one was struggling. So investments from the USSR and the Russian side, that it helped them to stay afloat. And then now we come to the 1950s and the 1960s. We are now, the British Empire is starting to collapse because now the British Empire is losing, its territories overseas, its colonies from Africa, South Asia. You come to the South American, and there was a fear amongst the elitists that, especially the lords, the viceroys that controlled these territories. They didn't want to bring their money directly to Britain because they were afraid of persecution or witch hunt. So now comes this idea of offshore accounts, especially in Britain-controlled territories like the Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, and the idea was that these territories were under British jurisdiction, but not under British jurisdiction. That means that, they were protected under British law, but some laws and especially financial laws and legal laws didn't apply to them as much as they apply to Britain. So the plan was to come and invest in this, this jurisdiction, and then somehow money can find itself inside the territory of Britain, and that would be easier rather than taking money from the colonies and taking them to Britain. Actually, this plan, when it started, it was only meant for the elitish British people, the people who control the colonies. But after years, and it has now been used by everyone around the world, if you come from Asia, you come from the Americans, you can create offshore accounts, Russia, Putin and his people do the same. But when it started, it was meant for the lords, the guys who control the colonies. How could they bring money back to Britain through a backdoor? And that's why these islands became very important, because you could go there, open a shell company, and then the shell company would invest in the UK, and it would be hard to trace that movement of money. But if you came with that money directly, it could be an issue. So when the now countries got independence, these lords are very afraid of bringing money to directly, like I said. So this is when the scheme started. And during that period also, when after the colony's independence, we come to Margaret Thatcher as the Prime Minister of Britain. She was the first Prime Minister in Britain to ensure that bank regulation and bank laws were a bit loose to allow investments to come in Britain. Because we must remember, Britain is not now a superpower. So it must look at how it can meet, it can compete with New York and also, retain its financial, hegemony. So Margaret Thatcher was one of the people who liberalized the banking system. And it went on to Tony Blair, to Brown, to Cameron. Each Prime Minister of Britain has always ensured that the regulation are a bit smooth so that people can invest on it. And you can see it even after the collapse of the USSR, the oligarchs that came into power immediately, most of them took their money to Britain. There are stories of oligarchs buying apartments for £200,000 at that time, and furnishing them with big TVs and all these things. So, Britain was a very attractive place for these oligarchs. Remember, Britain is a small country, and the fact it was a big colonial power, when it was extracting the wealth from all this colonial empire, most of the wealth, let's say 90%, used to go to Britain. So Britain increased its value as a country, its real estate, its infrastructure. So anyone who has big money and wants to invest somewhere where you can get good returns, the first country that comes to mind is Britain. That's why it's so attractive to these oligarchs. And during that time now, during the 90s, after the fall of the USSR, most oligarchs started investing in Britain real estate, buying companies and all this. And now we come to the year 2008, where the British government even decided to offer a golden visa, which is, when you invest $2 million, your permanent residency time can be shortened. to 2 to 3 years. When you add another $5 million on top, if you add $10 million, it becomes 2 years to get a permanent residency. And then you'll get a citizenship. It brings you faster to get a citizenship. So it was called a golden visa because the normal time to get a permanent residency in Britain is 5 years. But to invest $2 million in stocks, in shares, the time reduces. And this was very encouraging. Up to date, the people who have gone that process and and acquired the permanent residency at 13,000 people. And when you look at the statistics, it's mostly Russians and Chinese. They are the highest number that apply for this golden visa, because British is very attractive, an attractive investment for them. And if you look at how Britain has positioned itself, it's a country that always seeking out investors, guys, to invest in it. But since the Russian-Ukraine war, that privilege has been revoked. Britain now does not have a golden visa, because it now realizes that the golden visa program has been heavily abused, with talks that the fact that a lot of Russian money has been entering Britain since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Rumors of, I wouldn't say rumors, talk of the Conservative Party being heavily, under, funded by some Russian elites, So the same talk of the 1920s back, Russians are already, affecting politics in Britain by investing in Britain politics, investing in MPs, members of parliament, trying to coerce, there are so many issues. And also the tension between Britain and Russia has been accelerating, because Russia has also been actively, trying to infiltrate Britain's systems. We all know the poisoning of Skripal, the Russian agent who was given asylum by Britain. Him and his daughter were poisoned, and this put loggerheads between Russia and Britain. And we also that tit for tat game where Britain was expelling diplomats, Russians were expelling diplomats, and you can go back and see there are many things. The downing of the aeroplane that killed over 280 people. The one that flew over Ukraine and was shot down. Also British citizens were there. So there has been always this tension between Britain and Russia. And at this point, when you're talking Britain, Britain and Russia relations are at a very, very low point. In fact, the Ukraine war, you can see that the Prime Minister of Britain is one of the people who has visited Ukraine numerous times. Britain is the second largest funder of arms to Ukraine and money. So Britain has been actively, calling Russia to resist. In fact, Prime Minister Boris Johnson was the first world leader to say that Putin must fail. So you can see there's been heavy tension, between Russia and Israel. And we saw when the war started, immediately Britain, sanctioned many Russian companies, many Russian elite. It was more of like a blitzkrieg, the way Putin is saying, an economic blitzkrieg where Britain revoked everything. They turned the table, they turned the wheel on the Russian elite. Some of even the Russian elite didn't see it coming because they were so used to British society. I was reading an article of a Russian elite saying that he doesn't see anything different. That was there 2018. He doesn't see anything different between Britain politics and Russian politics, because the difference is that Britain is democratic, but it's run by money. So if he spends money, he gets the same results like how he spent in Russia. It's just that the process is a bit different. So it shows you even the Russian elite in Britain were very confident that they had the system in control. But this Ukraine war shows that the control of the system was just, everything was just a lie. And going through this, you can clearly see there have been enablers of these people, of the Russian people, to invest and find Britain a very hospitable place. As I read, as I go, like some of the reports that you can clearly see, shows that some of the reports that we can actually see show that how Russians have invested heavily in British system and ensure that nothing works. For example, and you know, one of the enablers of this, British and Russian, laundering scheme where the Russians have been able to launder money is the Deutsche Bank. The Deutsche Bank has been a very big culprit in this scheme, and here we can see that the, the 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 bank is under investigation for its role in the biggest scandal in Europe involving Denmark Bank, Danske Bank. This is Deutsche Bank and Danske Bank. Danske laundered 200 billion, of Russian money via its branch in Estonia. Deutsche provided correspondent banking services via its US subsidiary. So they've been able to launder almost $200 billion, into the British, into the British government in the financial system. And as I was saying earlier, they use the Cayman Islands, the British Islands, all these, where the jurisdiction is very far and it's very vague. So, and then they bring the money back to the UK, and that's how the Russian elite have been doing, And when you look at this, Russia is a country of 100 million, and here the 200 billion invested, it's money from less than 200 people, so only 200 people control. Less than 200 people control 200 billion. You could even say 100. It's a small clique. That, and most of them are, government, high government people like, FSB. These guys who own mining companies in Russia. All these guys. They make so much money and then they take it out of the country. It's good to remember also Deutsche Bank, because this bank really, at least like HSBC, which was accused of laundering cartel money. Deutsche Bank also, we must remember that it was under scrutiny for the Panama Papers. In recent years, the bank has had a series of bruising encounters with the international regulators. Between 2011 and 2018, it paid 14.5 billion in fines, with the exposure to dubious Russian money a regular theme. And let's remember that the fine of 14.5 billion is probably one of the highest fines that has ever been paid by any institution. In 2017, the UK Financial Conduct Authority imposed its largest fine, 163 million, after Deutsche carried out a $10 billion mirror trade scheme to run out of its branch in Moscow. The New York Department of Financial Services, DFS, fined the bank for $425 million over the same case, in which rubles are converted into dollars via fake trades on behalf of VIP Russian client. So this is just one of the things that shows, how this laundering scheme has been, has been carried out in a very sophisticated way, and in a way that it's hard, for authorities or anyone to detect it, because they're working with, reputable banks and other institutions. So if you look at all this, it paints a very dark picture of how Britain has been benefiting heavily on this on this scheme, and you can also look at Russian money that moves through another jurisdiction before arriving in Britain isn't counted as Russian, and since it's overwhelmingly majority of money that enters and leaves Russia does via tax havens such as Cyprus and Bahamas. This means that the official figure reflects only a small portion of the money the MPs are interested in. So it shows you that most money, like I was saying before, they come through the back door. Over the past decade, $68 billion has flowed from Russia into Britain offshores, satellites such as British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, Gibraltar, Jersey, Guernsey. That's seven times more money that has flowed directly from Russia into the UK. So $68 billion has flowed through the back door. That's 7 times more than the money that comes straight to the UK without passing these islands. When they go to these islands, they open shell companies. On top of that, some 94 billion, pounds poured out of Russia into Cyprus, 13 billion pounds into Switzerland, 23 billion pounds into Netherlands, which also has a network of its own tax haven. So this clearly shows that probably then the British financial system, has been heavily benefiting on Russian money, and that's why probably it was hard uh, to make this move. You go to a place like Belgrade in Britain, where one of the most expensive real estate is there. One of the most places where the most expensive real estate is there. You find that most properties are owned by the Russian. You know, like most properties. The French economist Thomas Piketty estimates that more than half of Russians' total wealth is held offshore in a manner, some 800 billion, dollars, and by a tiny number of people, perhaps just 100, like I was saying. So 800 billion, it's held by 100 people. And that's half of all Russian wealth. Let's remember the Russian population is 100 million plus. Sorry, I had said 120, but I believe it's even more than 120 or around 120, if I'm not wrong. But a tiny number of people, perhaps just a few hundred rich Russians live between London, Monaco, and Moscow. So this just shows, how Russian money has really, really been very, very influential. And that's why you can see that, when you look at, when you hear about Stephen Hawking, people like Stephen Hawking discussing about the Russian philosophy of governance, is a philosophy of corruption and patriotism, where people are patriotic and also corrupt at the same time. Here it says, in 2013, an analysis by the agency Knight and Frank estimated that almost a tenth of all buyers at top-end London market came from the Soviet Union. While rival estate agent Savills calculated that Russians like to buy the biggest houses of any group purchasers. Average house price in Kingston have risen eightfold over the past 2 decades, at least partly thanks to the influx of Russians. It shows even when they buy property somewhere, they buy the best property, and also that contributes to the rising of real estate price, because when you bring all this laundering money inside, it creates an artificial increase in value of property. In 8 years to September 2015, Russia citizens made up 764 of 3,386 people who paid for their so-called golden visa, making them the second largest group of applicants after the Chinese. This arrangement brought in around 800 million pounds of Russian investment, but the flow dropped markedly after 2015, when the UK authority began to check the origin of the money used to buy the government's bond. Also, the one thing they are not saying is that the flow dropped significantly. When Russia annexed Crimea, that's when this scrutiny started. We can all remember in 2015, the Russian accent annexed Crimea. So what happened is that it brought a scare in the whole of Europe, and we can remember that's when the first sanctions started. When the Obama administration heavily sanctioned Russia, even though it's not like now, but it also sent a warning to Britain and other country, and that's when the scrutiny started, because they started now seeing Russian as a rival. Here we can see that the Russians to invest in Britain has not been by accident. The British government over the years have been encouraging Russians to invest. Here we can hear Cameron during his trip to Moscow State University, where he said in his speech, Cameron boasted that Russian companies accounted for a quarter of shares offering on London Stock Exchange. Governments need to remember that business don't have to invest in your country. They choose to, and we need to help them to make that choice. Cameron said it means minimizing the burden of regulation so that business and entrepreneurship can flourish. So Cameron is stating that regulations that are needed to ensure that laundered money, dark money doesn't enter the market, are needed to be brought down. Because when you say, because the regulations also have to be there because of something. So if you say you're bringing down regulation, even the bad people, the bad elements will take advantage. We're not saying anyone or Russians who invest in Britain are not legit, but it creates an atmosphere where most people will try and take advantage of, of this program. So when you look at Britain and the Russian relations, right now as we talk, they're at loggerheads because you know more than $600 billion of Russian asset has been frozen by the Western side. So the Russians are also not happy, and just a few months ago we saw the Chinese government telling its citizens not to, banning them from buying property abroad, and if anyone has property to sell it, because also the Chinese government is fearing in case it finds itself in a confrontation with the Western world. It has already seen how Russia has been affected, and going forward, I feel like the UK-Russian relationship will just, become worse and worse because Russia sees Britain as an extension of America, and all these Russians also view its America as also, which is at the back playing the piper. So when you see how uh, this war has created a very, big ripple, because a lot of Russian elites lost their money just like that in one day, through sanctions. And I can't say it's only Russians to blame. I feel like also British and the British government really benefited from Russian money coming into UK, because those investment had stipulations of employing people and and all that. It was more of a mutual kind of relationship. You scratch my back, I scratch your back, and going forward we'll try to analyze and see how everything goes. And I don't know. I feel it's a bit tricky because you can hear the even talks of visa bans on Russians, especially tourists. They are not going to even. Some months ago, the Russian government was advising its citizens not to travel to Britain anymore because Britain are deliberately, making it hard for Russians to acquire visa. Even though the British government came out and said the reason is because they have a high influx of Ukrainians, so applying visa takes time. But I don't personally I don't believe that, because you can see the other European countries are really, especially the former the former Soviet states, are actually pushing for visa bans. Countries like Poland, Estonia, Latvia, some of them are even doing them individually. Countries like Czech is now the president of the European Union, and it's pushing. These former Soviet countries, in fact, are doing this visa ban, especially tourists, individually, without even waiting for the EU to do a blanket one. And also Britain is considering also imposing. The aim is to pressure the Russian government to retract its war on Ukraine. I don't know. I'm just eager to see how it goes. But I feel, this relationship, you can't blame one or the other, because um, it was, it sounds to me like the same relationship that Portugal did with Angola. When we saw that the Portuguese economy was down and they encouraged investors, especially most of them came from Angola. Angola is an oil-rich country, and when the investment started becoming too much, a lot of money was flowing into Portugal, and now it was the Portuguese felt it was this money was influencing even their political life. You know, because where money is, money talks, and people listen. They immediately started a witch hunt on targeting this money, saying it's from corrupt people. Angola is a corrupt country, people are bringing corrupt money, but initially they were encouraging this. But when they saw this money was playing against them, they changed the game. And I feel this is what is happening here. you know the Russians are not also angels in this. they are looting from their country and invested in Britain. And also Britain knows really, because if you look at the London financial system, most of the money is usually dark money. That's what they say, not just from Russia. Through the Caymans and all these islands, it has enabled almost $40 trillion, yeah, to pass through this financial system, which most of the money is not accounted. But we wait to see. The British government has started passing legislation to ensure even if you invest in the Cayman Islands, it would be at easy. But to fight corruption is not an easy thing. If you're fighting big money, you also need big money and big backing. And that is one of the things that most British citizens have been crying about, that this illegal money cannot be fought because the agencies that are provided the power to fight are not funded very good. And you can't fight guys who are investing trillions of dollars into this financial system with just with just basic authority. You need a mechanism, you need a system, a heavily funded system just to flush these people out. But for now, the British government is passing laws and ensuring that everything they'll shock to this. Let's see how it goes. Again, guys, subscribe, like, so that this content can so that it can appeal to YouTube algorithm, and also on the comments, comment, critique, anything that I can do. Yeah, because even critique is like, it will make me better. So until next time, God bless. See you later, guys.